Welcome to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. I'm the producer and your host, Deborah Sloss, licensed marriage and family therapist, and my pronouns are she, her. Today's show is part 3 in our Creativity and Wellness series, and we're going to be talking about the therapeutic benefits of moving our bodies and dance. You may also want to check out the other 2 shows in this series, episode 53 on Writing to Heal, and episode 54 on the healing power of making art. Each of these shows includes an extensive and really practical resource list, which can be found in the show notes at www.stateofmindmedia.org. People have been moving their bodies creatively in the form of dance for thousands of years. Movement and dance offer many benefits for mental health and brain function. Like many forms of exercise, dance is known to reduce stress and anxiety levels, and many of us know firsthand the experience of being in a low mood and how listening to music, or even better, moving our bodies, can help us feel happier and more positive. Dance can also improve cognitive functions such as creative thought, memory, and decision-making. Movement and dance can be a fun way to express yourself, help you feel more confident and comfortable in your body, and provide opportunities to socialize and meet new people. Dancing with friends and family can also be a playful and fun way to spend time together. And finally, some people are drawn to dance for the sense of meaning that it brings to their lives. No matter the reason you dance, it's important to understand that natural talent is not at all required to derive these many mental health benefits from movement and dance. Joining me for this conversation is Dr. Rachel Jordana Horodecki, a licensed clinical psychologist, certified 5 rhythms teacher, a certified yoga teacher, and the founder of Creative Dance Psychology. She previously held a position as adjunct faculty at John F. Kennedy University and was vice president of the Center for Humanistic Development. She has a private practice in Santa Cruz, California, and teaches dance in Santa Cruz and internationally. She's the mother of 2 delightful young boys and considers them the most valuable part of her life. Her mission on the planet, other than being a mom, is to bring people dance as a form of healing. Shankar Hemedy is founder and CEO of Blue Horizons, a San Francisco-based company that has supported technology companies, universities, and social causes worldwide since 2016. He facilitates workshops on transformative leadership and creative careers at various organizations. Shankar trained as an engineer early in his career and later studied business management at Stanford University, and then went on to study the neuroscience of compassion and happiness at the University of California, Berkeley. He lives with his wife in Carmel by the Sea and in Cupertino, California. Since discovering dance and learning to both let his mind rest and to connect his mind and body, Shankar says that all aspects of his life have changed for the better. Also with us is Valeria Val Miranda, the executive director of the Santa Cruz Art League and of Pajaro Valley Arts in Watsonville. Val is passionate about the power of the arts and culture to change individuals, communities, and society. She's worked in and with arts organizations since 1992. Though she dabbles in drawing and photography, dance has been her core artistic expression since she was a little girl in Rio de Janeiro, where she was born and raised. Though she considered a professional dance career in her youth, these days Val takes dance classes and goes out dancing several times a week and finds it brings her joy and a caring community. I'm so excited to welcome to State of Mind Rachel, Shankar, and Val.
So nice to be here. Thank you.
Deborah, thank you for inviting us. It's our honor to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, Rachel, I'm thinking, can we start with you? Can you describe what therapeutic movement in dance is and how it might differ from something like a dance class or performative dance?
Well, I think first off, it would be important for me to distinguish the difference between dance movement therapy and a conscious dance class that has therapeutic benefits. So dance movement therapy is more structured and has a master's program and a PhD program. You can find licensed dance movement therapists and go to therapy groups. The thing, I am not a licensed dance movement therapist. I'm a 5 rhythms teacher. So what I am capable of talking about is conscious dance or embodiment classes and how they can be therapeutic.
Wonderful. Can you just talk a little more about what distinguishes that from something like a typical dance class people might think of, or performative dance?
Absolutely. So the intention of a conscious dance is giving people the opportunity to express what is going on for them. So there's the opportunity to make the invisible visible and to dance with your feelings and to have emotional process. A dance class is often more about creating beauty, creating a shape, following choreography, or creating a performance.
So, would a person have to consider themselves a dancer or have dance talent or even a fit body to engage and derive benefit from this kind of therapeutic dance that you're describing?
Absolutely not. In fact, the trained dancers often have to rehabilitate themselves to be able to experience dance for them rather than as a performance for other people. Anyone can do it. We have chairs in the middle of the dance floor sometimes so that you can sit and move. You can be still and move. It's about what it feels like, not what it looks like.
So, we've just completed a couple of shows on looking at other forms of creativity and the value that they can have for mental and physical health. What do you think sets movement and dance apart as a tool for supporting mental and physical health from some of the other creative outlets that we discussed in those previous shows?
Well, I think every single one of those outlets is extremely valuable. And in fact, I would recommend that they all be done. The benefits of dance are that it incorporates the physical body. And there's a lot we know of trauma stored in the body, an emotional process that is held in the body. And when we physically move it, physically, we also have the opportunity to rewire our neural networks and clear the debris in our minds and make mental changes. So it stimulates the mind body connection in its own unique way.
So, Shankar, I want to turn to you because you have a really interesting story about how you found your way to dance as an adult. Can you share about what happened, what was happening with your body, and how you came to start dancing?
Well, I had never danced since I was a teenager, and the whole focus was on technology because that's what was my ticket to freedom, financial freedom. So after 20 years of being in the field of technology, mostly in electronics and software and internet, um, I started experiencing a lot of pain in the body, and it was unexplainable pain. I went to all kinds of doctors and therapists, and they tried everything, including corticosteroids and pain medication. It wouldn't stop. And then I met someone, Dr. Avi Herskowitz, who was one of the first integrative clinicians in San Francisco. He one look at me and he said, "Let me check your pulse." And he checked my pulse a different way, and the traditional Chinese way. And he said, "Your problem is not physical." And my first thought was he's saying something is mental about me, something is wrong with me. And I asked him that. He said, "No, your body and mind are not resting." And I said, "I get 6 to 8 hours of sleep. What's the problem?" And he said, "No, the problem is that even when you sleep," he asked me a few more questions, my mind is always active. And the mind is not silencing because I'm using it all the time. So his best recommendation was I sit in silence for a certain period of time. And I did a 10-day Vipassana or mindfulness meditation class. And within 3 days, all the pain was gone. It was unbelievable. But there was a yearning to move. The more I sat in silence, the more I realized I had not let my body move. I was just so much in my head. It was almost like my body was cut off from my head. So I promised myself after those 10 days, I would go find a place to move. But I knew I didn't like classes because they're very structured for me. And it felt like I was bound by It just felt like any other extension of any other technology I was working on. So I Googled dance with no steps, and I found 5 rhythms. Dance with no fixed steps, literally. And this was the year 2002. I've been letting my body move ever since then. Probably the most interesting concept, as Rachel referred to it, is that it was not a performance. I know that my body has a mind of its own, and I let my body move. And the mind sometimes follows it, sometimes it doesn't. But this dissonance between what's happening in the body and what's happening in the mind is actually something I get to look at every single time. And there's much more to it.
Well, I want to ask you, as you were dealing with that situation of chronic pain, what related mental health problems were you also having? And how did dance help address those?
Now, as you know, Deborah, a lot of so called mental problems never get diagnosed because we don't go see a therapist because of the stigma around any of these things. Like most technologists in Silicon Valley, in the San Francisco Bay Area, I used to work almost around the clock, especially when I was doing a startup. So there was a lot of anxiety, especially we had 9/11 in those days. We had the dot-com bust. So there was a lot of anxiety around, will my, having had 2 or 3 startups succeed, this extreme pressure I had put myself in. So some kind of a panic disorder, if you will, or just anxiety, generalized anxiety was very common. Then again, I had grown up in a lot of poverty in India. So having gone through that to the other extreme, which is having enough, was had its own set of challenges. Um, it was only after I had enough food on the table that I asked myself the questions: Is this what I really want to do? And there was again a dissonance between what I really wanted to do and what I was doing. I didn't really need the money, but that wasn't obvious at all. What I needed was a little bit of my time with the family, time with friends, uh, just just being myself rather than constantly doing something to achieve and go somewhere. That wasn't clear at all. And you might call it midlife crisis. There's just a whole bunch of names around it, but it was really, I call it almost a separation between where I want to be and where I was. It's like you climb the corporate ladder and discover that you're on the wrong ladder. So that was definitely what I was facing.
Well, when I talked to you about coming on the show, you told me that you had been forever changed by what you learned through your experience dancing. Can you say more about what changed for you, both physically and mentally, and how that lives in your life now, today?
Well, I think the most important change was that I was able to relax around any situation or almost any situation. Uh, the the need to succeed was so strong. I had put myself under tremendous uh, pain. And again, if there was anything that came from the past, whether it was, facing my own mother's challenges around sexual abuse, I would just completely suppress it. The problem with suppressing this kind of strong emotions is that it manifests itself in the body. So I don't do that anymore. I think the biggest shift was allowing my body to speak to me and allowing my mind to relax into whatever was going on, to be able to listen to my own thoughts, to not shut off that even judging mind. People say, don't listen to your judging mind. I would say the opposite. Try to listen to it, but don't get carried away by it. And that's something that took years, not just of dance, but also therapy, to be able to listen to even a judging mind. We judge ourselves. There's not one person who thinks they are perfect the way they are. We often have all kinds of positive and negative judgments, right? Sometimes it's highly inflated, like I'm the best in the world, I'm the humblest person on earth, is a classic, contradictory judgment. But there are all these other judgments. What will people think of me? Or I think I'm not good enough, or I'm an imposter, all kinds of judgments. To be able to listen to it and say, yeah, Shankar is just being human. And it's okay. It's okay if he feels that way. It's okay if he feels like he's not good enough. To be able to acknowledge that is a huge thing.
Rachel, I'm wondering if there's anything in Shankar's story that you might want to elaborate on.
Well, for one, Shankar, I'm just so delighted to hear you talk and the wisdom that is coming out of you because, we've spent years, at least a decade, dancing. And for me, experiencing what he's saying from an embodied perspective with not a huge amount of verbiage around it. One of the things that I was thinking about actually as you were talking was the community that we developed by going through this process together every Monday night for however long. And I was just curious if you had anything to say about that.
Yeah, in fact, I danced almost at least 40 to 50 times a year with the same community from 2002 to 2016. The community feeling was so strong that when I went to India to do social work, um, every Monday night, I would just wake up because it was midnight over there, or, it was definitely nighttime over there. And I would get up missing the urge to dance with my community.
So I understand, Rachel, you had your own powerful healing experience that was accessed through therapeutic dance. Can you share just a little bit of that and how that led you to then become trained as a Five Rhythms dance instructor?
Well, I'll describe how I found dance because it's relevant. So, while I was getting my doctorate in clinical psychology in San Francisco, I had gained, I don't know, 50 pounds. I was really stressed and I had a thyroid issue and I was really uncomfortable in my body and having a lot of judgment and feeling like I was in a cage, that I just really didn't want to exist on this planet. And I stumbled into something called Sweat Your Prayers, which is a class with not a lot of instruction, which is a place to practice five rhythms. And I stumbled into it after a yoga class. And I found a freedom that I didn't know could exist in my body. It was like a remembering of what it was like to be a child wrestling with my brothers, or almost feeling what it would have been like in a previous existence where I was a fish swimming in a school. I mean, it was just this ethereal, delightful, joyful movement experience that reminded me of the joy to be alive. And instead of feeling like I was in a cage in my body, I actually was using my body as a way to feel free. And it was so transformative for me that I started dancing almost every day, started flying around the world to dance with Gabrielle Roth, the founder of the practice, and realized that I was getting as much, if not more, from these workshops and classes than I was from therapy and studying to be a therapist. And I realized that for me, the path is both. And so I decided to train.
I understand Five Rhythms is one type of therapeutic dance. Can you just name and describe some of the other types?
Five Rhythms is the mothership, and from there, a lot else developed. Five Rhythms actually was inspired by, the ancestral dancing around the fire and just moving however you want to the beat of the drums and the beats of your heartbeat. So Gabrielle Roth developed the Five Rhythms, and then from there, other people have taken new practices and made it their own, developed their own curriculum. So the one that is probably the most heard of is ecstatic dance. That's a great way to find dance. I just want to caution people that the particular dance that I am talking about is not just about ecstasy. It's about feeling every single feeling. It's about the jealous dance, the angry dance, the uncomfortable dance. So you could go to an ecstatic dance, but please, if you want to derive the therapeutic benefits, while there is brilliance and joy, and that is absolutely available, I would encourage you to have permission to dance every single feeling you have. So ecstatic dance is probably the most wide one. There's also open floor. I would say I would highly recommend some really excellent teachers teaching that. There's the 360 emergence, there's soul motion, and there are new practices being developed every day.
You're listening to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, and I'm here talking with Dr. Rachel Jordana Horodesky, a licensed psychotherapist, yoga instructor, and dance instructor, as well as with businessman and dancer Shankar Hemedy and arts administrator and lifelong dancer Val Miranda. We're discussing the many benefits movement and dance have for the mind and the body. This is part 3 in our Creativity and Wellness series. You may also want to check out part 1 on Writing to Heal and part 2 on the healing power of making art, which can be found in our archives at www.stateofmindmedia.org. Now, back to our interview. Also with us today is Valeria, who's been a lifelong dancer. So, Val, how did you get started dancing and what kind of dances have you done?
Well, I have to be honest that I don't remember exactly, but I started dancing at my grandmother's feet. I'm from Brazil, and is in our cultural DNA. So I don't have a date, but I still have the memory of dancing, and me being a little kid, and my parents, my family members, and I was at the level of their legs, so I still have memories of that. And dancing in my living room, dancing at the beach, dancing in many different places. I have tried many, many, many different kinds of dance, from ballet to modern to jazz to tap to belly dancing when I was pregnant. And so I've tried just about everything. I've tried tango. I just really enjoy the challenge of trying, that sort of like awkward moment when you first start trying something, and then progressively, be more at home, and then click. I absolutely love that.
You told me that dancing for you now as an older dancer is different. And I'm wondering if you can talk about what's changed for you in and through your dance.
As I approach 60, which I'll be in June, I it's been a really beautiful journey because I don't feel limits in terms of, oh, I can't do this. This is too hard for me, or I don't feel that yet, and I feel really blessed, by that, because I have friends that are going through this. I also notice the memory in my body of movements that I've been doing for such a long time, and that I can find them even if I haven't done a particular kind of dance for a very long time. And I also realize and acknowledge and welcome the the fact that it takes a little longer to warm up. And so I try to be very attentive um to the needs of my body as I age. And that it's kind of funny now because I'm usually the oldest dancer in many of the classes that I go to. And at first, when I started coming back to dance classes after the lockdown, I have to admit, part of me was like, oh my God, all of a sudden now I'm the oldest dancer in the room. And then I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, I was in a class, in a younger dancer actually walked up to me and another dancer and said, it's so cool to dance with older women. And I was like, oh, and it just felt so good that, that she did that acknowledgement, in the sense that there was no competition. There was a sharing of experiences, and a joy of dancing. So it's been a cool, intense, and beautiful journey. And I'm enjoying it.
And would you be willing to speak some about the relationship with your body? You were talking to me a little bit before you came on the show about how dance has been a vehicle for you in in fostering and nurturing that relationship.
As I said, dance is it's in my DNA, being from Brazil. And I it's something that I do. Everybody dances in Brazil. It's an expression of joy, it's an expression of fun, of sensuality. And I've never thought of dance as an exercise, in the sense that folks said, oh, I'm going to take up dance as a way to, it's just has always been their roots for me. I think that's another really important part of it, is that it connects me to my parents, to my grandmother, to all, to a line of folks behind me that often danced as a way to, on one side of my family, I'm the great granddaughter of slaves. And so dancing was often a way to coping with a very harsh day to day. On the other side of my family, on my dad's side, um uh, my great grandparents were Jewish immigrants from, from the Iberian Peninsula to, to Brazil. And so, to there was also this connection with the local culture and with dance as a way to also um, uh, uh, find some moments of solace away from racism and prejudice and in daily hardship. So uh, dance has always been a way to ground myself, to honor those that came before me, and that we have been dancing for, for hundreds of years. And it's an expression of joy. And it always also brings lightness, in the sense that I can be here in the moment and experience this joy and lightness, and that, of course, puts everything into perspective, and makes you feel different about, something that maybe was concerning you. Yesterday I had a bit of a hard day with some things, some piece of news that I got that were, that were hard. And then I went to my Afro-Brazilian dance class last night, which I go to every Monday. And the live drums, Portuguese being spoken around me, all of that, I just breathed out, and in my body. And I have to admit, before I went, I was like, oh, maybe I should just stay home and think this through. And maybe today's not such a good idea to go. But I went, and I'm not gonna lie, I sort of dragged myself to go there. But once I was there, my body my body relaxed. I met other friends. I walked back, from the dance class home, and I felt so much better, than I had been before. So it always brings this element of grounding myself, slowing down, speeding up, being in my body, and being in community, and giving me perspective.
Yeah, I really hear you're saying it like also renewed and kind of resourced you to deal with the things outside of the class itself, that experience. Beautiful. Val, before you came on the show, you mentioned to me that you were taking this particular improv class and how powerful that's been for you. And I'm wondering if you could describe what you've been doing in the class and how that's been helpful to you.
This particular choreographer that I was working with, she the this contemporary dance improvisation class incorporated writing, and both writing, pre-existing writing, but also inviting the participants to write. And so it could be a prompt, that you would give to us, or it could be a something that, that she read, that she would share with us. And what was amazing in being in this class is that uh, we often had the opportunity to give expression from the prompt when we would start dancing, it would give me the opportunity to sometimes put in movement something that I was still maybe processing in my mind, that some of the words have come through the prompting, through writing about the prompt that she had given to us. And sometimes the movement was an opportunity to, to work through that, to work through that concept or that emotion, and sometimes the prompt would be, what emotion came up for you when you listen to this particular song, and now dance to that emotion, not to the particular rhythm of the song as much. And so it was a really creative opportunity to be in the moment, dealing with the emotions that that were arising, as opposed to thinking, I'm going to put this step with this step, and so on and so forth.
So, Rachel, as you've been leading and teaching therapeutic dance, what observations have you had about the unique ways that dance can be used as a powerful therapeutic tool?
There are so many. There are so many. I'm a humanistic psychologist, meaning that I believe that ultimately we are the experts of our own healing and that we have the answers inside of us. And my experience of these dance classes is that it's doing that with dance. So each person is bringing in their unique need, and then they ultimately write and find their own unique prescription. So, a vague example would be if you need more balance in your life, you might stand on one foot and see what it's like to fall over and have the physical experience of balance. One of the things in the five rhythms is that we actually embody the elements that Gabrielle Roth teaches. And so the elements are flowing, staccato, chaos, lyrical, and stillness. And every single one of these rhythms has a deep teaching on life. And different people are comfortable in different rhythms. And usually the rhythm that you're uncomfortable in is the one that you can really benefit from practicing the most. So if you're sort of a rigid person and you really like things to be the way they're supposed to be, spending a lot of time in flowing could be really helpful. If you don't have any idea of what to do ever, staccato, which is the more about clarity, is a helpful tool. And the way that might look is by actually making clear physical shapes, having someone witness you in a clear shape, having someone mirror your shape. We're literally embodying interventions that we need to call into our lives.
So I know you're also trained as a yoga teacher, and I'm wondering if you can speak some about what other kinds of movement besides dance can also be therapeutic, and what may those other types of movement have in common with dance, and in what ways may they differ?
Well, I think every single one of these movement practices has the ultimately helps us regulate our nervous systems. And that is one of the biggest issues with mental health, is that when we're not regulated, it shows up as all of these other pathologies. So there's 100 zillion ways to regulate, and guided movement can be also very valuable. So my experience in a yoga class is sometimes I'm so busy thinking about my breath and the postures that I'm completely just not listening to my mind anymore. And sometimes just getting out of my mind is enough to calm me down, minimizes all the anxiety, all of the notions that there's a problem, when ultimately actually everything is okay as long as I think it's okay. So, yoga classes also, they have the physical prescription. So for example, if you need to re-examine your life from a different point of view, stand on your head for 5 minutes. Or if you're feeling like you want to be really strong, warrior 2 for 20 breaths. So it's got different, every single one of these yoga or movement classes has their own way of rebalancing the nervous system. And ultimately, every single movement is a metaphor for life. and you go to the one that you need.
So I just want to mention to listeners, if that's an interesting idea for you, we did a whole show on yoga therapy and the benefits of yoga, and also another program on regulating the central nervous system. And you kind of tapped into both of those concepts in your response there. So those can be found in our archives. So Rachel, for someone who might be interested but not know where to start, are there any entry level approaches that you find reliable and helpful for your students or clients?
I would absolutely suggest coming to a 5 Rhythms introductory class or workshop as a good entryway if you are feeling like you would like some guidance. If going to a class feels like too much, there are some free resources on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you type in Gabrielle Roth Power Wave Dance, there's a guided dance, and then there will be several after that you can do by yourself in your living room. There are also books that she wrote that will help give you some theory and some inspiration. If you'd like to go to a class, my recommendation would be to use the Google search to find one in your area. And the things you would look up are 5 Rhythms in, and then put in the name of your town, or ecstatic dance in and put in the name of your town. If you're in Santa Cruz, I love working with beginners. That's one of my specialties. And generally my classes are donation based, so they're really intended to be a resource for people.
I was recently in Sedona, and I saw that on those beautiful red rocks there, they had just a little poster up that said ecstatic dance, every whatever week, I think, on these beautiful rocks at sunset. I was like, wow, that must be an amazing thing. So I think many communities have their own little micro community, right, that is offering these kinds of offerings.
Oh yes, I tour. I go to them and I offer classes or workshops or just ecstatic dance sets.
You're listening to State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss. I'm talking with Dr. Rachel Jordana Horodecki, a licensed psychotherapist, yoga instructor, and dance instructor, as well as businessman and dancer Shankar Hemedy, and arts administrator and lifelong dancer Val Miranda. We're discussing the many therapeutic benefits movement and dance offer for mental health and brain function. Every State of Mind episode has a resource list, and the resources we talk about today and more can be found in the show notes for this episode. You can also listen or subscribe to our podcasts on all the major podcasting sites and on your home smart speaker. Show notes, resources, our podcasts, and where to subscribe can all be found at our website, www.stateofmindmedia.org. Back to our interview. Shankar, you also talked about that dance was very specifically an unwinding for you, that was very valuable. And I'm wondering, what would you recommend or say to someone about how they might be able to access some kind of dance as an unwinding process?
If there's a 5 Rhythms class in your neighborhood or in your city, by all means, that's a great start. Having said that, when I went to India, there were no 5 Rhythms dance classes. There are other classes that are similar and have evolved differently, but that are available. In South America and in big parts of Europe, there's biodanza, 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 or the dance of life in Espanol, I believe. Very, very beautiful, very community oriented, again, accessible in many parts of the world. Folk dances that are not prescriptive. There are many folk dances in India, for example. Now, especially the dances that came out of the gypsy traditions from Africa. and from the Latin countries like Portugal and the Spanish dances that are not too structured, but there is a rhythm to it. So all that people have to know is what's the rhythm, and that's what, and it's very natural. We either dance just like in Tai Chi, in a movement of stillness, or you would be doing a very structured, not structured, a very defined movement like in staccato, or it could be just a flow. A lot of what are called feminine dances tend to be flow dances. My own favorite, and this is an anecdote that relates to my early days in five dances dancing, was that I loved chaos. Now, whoever likes chaos, because my life was very chaotic as a child. So I loved chaos so much that I had tremendous difficulty with defined movement, staccato. I also had a lot of difficulty with just being in the flow. So I would always thrive on chaos, but have tremendous difficulty when there was no chaos in the environment. Can you imagine how therapeutic it was to be able to embrace what other people consider a good life, which is just the gentle moving of the waves or just sitting and sipping a drink and just being chill? So, again, there are many other ways of dancing. Any folk dance that is not too prescriptive is a great start as well. There are other forms of dance, any gypsy dance, that I found them around the world. You'll find them. Many of the Latino dances tend to be very spontaneous as well. Of course, there's the American Dance Therapy Association. They have a lot of literature available for free on YouTube so that people understand the therapeutic value. And a lot of research has been done, including there have been PhDs in five rhythms and in ADTA, dance therapy, dance as a therapy, or dancing for specific symptoms or certain, what I call, certain mental and physical conditions. That's also available in many parts of the world.
So a good example of that is like you were saying, Rachel earlier was saying, sometimes our work is in the area of the thing that doesn't come easily to us. So you were saying that you loved the chaos movements, but working on the staccato and the flow were more challenging. But in doing that, it helped in that unwinding process. And did it bring better balance to your life?
Absolutely. I always would leave jobs if it wasn't challenging. And I always would go to, these chaotic startups. But that's not necessarily the best thing because it's like working on adrenaline 24/7 by 365. The problem with that is that it would exhaust the natural build of, I mean, I would either be on an endorphin rush or in an adrenaline rush, which is either stress or excitement. The third component of life, which is very important, is rest and digest.
So, Rachel, I want to talk a little bit about stigma because we always try to address that. It's such a big part of mental health and such a barrier in so many ways. So, I'm wondering about what role you think stigma might play in preventing access for people to movement and dance.
Well, I think that levels of self-consciousness in any way, somebody thinking I don't have a dancer's body might prevent them from coming. To anyone who does think that, I want to let you know that the dances that I go to have a wide variety of ages and bodies. I would say the biggest challenge that I see in my communities actually is for this practice to be more widely available to all cultures. It tends to be a predominantly white practice. And uh, I think part of that is the cost. A part of it is the music selection, and also part of it is that the need that other cultures, there are certain cultures where dance is a big part of gathering, and it hasn't been as lost. And I think in the American culture that we're in, there are a lot of people who are grieving the loss of dance and connection who are coming to it
And I also just think about, when we've talked about yoga and other types of movement in the past, there have been things like people being in differently abled bodies, sometimes feeling that unsure, but you've addressed that earlier and talked about that there's a space for every kind of body, and there can be chairs in the middle of the room. And sometimes people in larger bodies think that there's not a place for them there. And I think you've addressed that too.
And if I may add something to that, it's not just different types of bodies. Gabrielle Roth, when she started the Five Rhythms practice, it partly originated when she was working with people who had different states of the mind. I believe she was volunteering as a student to get enough money, and she had to kind of babysit or take care of people at a mental asylum or some kind of a place where people are going through rehabilitation. And what she noticed was that if she tried to teach them a particular step, they wouldn't get it. But for sure, they would dance in their own ways when she put on music. And that is the beginning of spontaneous dance practices. So it is actually very welcoming to have these kinds of practices where any movement is allowed as long as you don't hurt someone else physically or intrude their space. So that's something very important. We don't we take care of ourselves, we take care of others physically and emotionally. The rest is all open. You can do whatever you want.
Gabrielle Roth would say people would go up to her and say, I love the way you dance. I'd like to learn to dance like you. And she would say, don't learn to dance like me, learn to dance like you.
So, Rachel, we're coming close to the last phase of our program, and I'm wondering if there are resources that you'd want to share specifically with our listeners about that you use or that you'd recommend that might specifically support mental health.
Well, specifically going to a dance class and then joining it with treatment. And especially if you happen to have dance teachers who are also trained to be therapists. Um, you could also look up on Psychology Today, looking for a dance movement therapist. That's its own unique form of treatment. But yes, to anyone who feels stuck in their life in any way, I would suggest they get up and change positions and physically start moving. And if they unstick the body, they'll unstick their mind.
What about you, Val? Are there any resources that you'd like to share with our listeners?
In addition to what was brought up, obvious in terms of like YouTube and so on and so forth, the resources that I would suggest would be getting out of the house, getting out of where you live. And so obviously, the library, for example, which is one of my favorite things as an immigrant, is I love libraries in the United States. And so it's a great resource for music, for dance instruction, DVDs, and so on and so forth. I think that that's free, to all. And I think that that's something to really take advantage. I am based in Santa Cruz, so I like to say that Santa Cruz is the dance capital of the Central Coast, or the dance capital of California. And there's just so much outdoors. There's Salsa by the Bay every Sunday afternoon. There's swing dance second Saturday of the month at the Upper Wharf. There's the Tenerife Dance and Cultural Center, Motion Pacific 418 Project, which I think it's where the Five Rhythms class is in the county.
It's at the Tannery in Tannery Studio A. There's a Five Rhythms class on Mondays from 7 to 9. I host them on Tuesdays once every 3 months at the equinox and solstice. And there's Dance Circle every Sunday morning from 9 to 11. They're all donation based at 1060 River Street, Studio A.
And so building onto that, I also think it's great to go out and see people dance. There's Santa Cruz Dance Week everywhere. And a great thing that has been happening for the last year in Santa Cruz, which I want to mention, is Afrobeats, which is there's a local DJ that does an event weekly. and you just go out and dance. It's not a class. It's dancing in community, which I think it's really, really important. And to me, it's even more freeing because, in this particular case, you don't have to pay. You just show up, you're with people, and you're outdoors, which is even more. This is not a club. It's an outdoors event. And those are some of the things that I wanted to share.
Where's the Afrobeats?
The Afrobeats moves around, but it's usually at Woodhouse Brewing. But the brewery is inside and you dance outside, so you're not even like connected to that. So I highly recommend that. It's a community that has formed within the last year in Santa Cruz, and it's been amazing. People of all colors, ages, dogs, families, and it starts early and it ends early, so it's an amazing community. So DJ Monk Earl is the person responsible for forming this community, and I really recommend. And then drummers show up and drum to the music. It's a beautiful event, so I highly recommend that.
So Rachel, as we come to the end of our time, what wisdom have you gleaned from your many years of working with people and helping them engage with movement and dance for healing?
I would say the greatest point is that everything we need to know is inside our bodies, and there's so much wisdom available if we just put our bodies in motion. I think of this practice as a moving meditation, and I like to say try meditation before medication. Also, so important, you don't need to look good to dance. This is a dance for you. It's not a dance for anyone else. And it doesn't matter what you look like. And so I would just encourage anyone who is dance curious to try it out. Go to YouTube, go to a class, and just see if there's anything available for you there.
I love that. Shankar, how about you? Are there a couple last thoughts that you'd like to leave listeners with?
Yes, paying attention to the body is very important. We are told again and again to mind your language, mind your thoughts, but often we forget that the body is much larger than the brain and the higher faculties. The body is everywhere, and including the brain and the other parts. So paying attention to the body is very important. Another thing is that, as I would second what Valeria said, which is move and be moved. When you move with others, you understand them better. Body language is such a huge thing that we forget. In fact, most of our relationships are nonverbal. We don't always talk, but we can be listening to everything that's happening. So paying attention not only to our body, but to the bodies of our pets, to the bodies all around us, and to trees and the wind. It's so important, and we forget that.
Is there any final thoughts that you'd want to leave listeners with, Val?
Sure. There's two things. One is that dance can also be a tool for understanding in the world that we're living in. We have so many cultures. American society is so polarized. So we didn't get too much into that, but I wanted to mention, go find dance from a culture that you're not familiar with at all. And that's been always one of the reasons why I've taken so many kinds of dancing, just as I have learned other languages so that I could read, read books in their original language. It's always a way to understand other cultures. And I think that this is really important in the moment that we live in this country. And so that's one thing that I wanted to recommend. Look at dance as a way to understand, cultures that you're not familiar with. And last thing, just dance, reconnect with the joy that you came into this world with.
Our to say a huge thank you again to our guests today, Dr. Rachel Jordana Horodesky, Shankar Hemedy, and Val Miranda. And thanks to you for joining us here on State of Mind, Being Human and Living Well. I'm your host, Deborah Sloss, and I want to let you know that new episodes of State of Mind, exploring mental health and wellness, are released the first Sunday of every month and can be found along with our complete archive on our website at www.stateofmindmedia.org. Also, if you found today's show interesting and you'd like to learn more, or you're looking for resources for yourself or a loved one, check out the resource list in the show notes. If you missed part of this episode or you just want to hear it again, subscribe to our podcast on all the major podcast platforms. When you rate and review our podcast, you actually help it get found and heard by more listeners. So if you like what you're hearing on any of our episodes, could you please do that for us? Special thanks to Jeannie Baltzkowski for audio production, to Patrice Vecchione for In Your Voice story coaching, and to Lisa Herendine for research. And thanks to acoustic guitarist Adrienne Legg for composing, performing, and donating the use of our theme music. State of Mind was developed and originally broadcast in association with KSQD-FM in Santa Cruz, California. We always want to hear from listeners and community members just like you. You can submit your very own In Your Voice recording and become part of the conversation by either calling in to leave a message or record an audio file right on your phone. Either way, tell us about a mental health experience you've had, something that's contributed to your mental health recovery, or share a resource that's been helpful to you. We're now looking for In Your Voice contributions from people who have experience with the profound grief associated with losing a child at any age and with ketamine-assisted therapy. We really do want to hear from you, and your voice may just be on one of our future shows. Submission details can be found at www.stateofmindmedia.org. Come on back and join us again next month for a whole new episode of State of Mind. Until then, live well. This is listener-supported community radio, KSQD Santa Cruz. Just remember, 90.7 FM, K-Squid, your ink spot on the dial. Stay with us.